everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. This week, we're talking about midlife, the changes that happen during that period, but especially the impact those have on our marriages. To talk about this, I've invited Jules Anderson. Jules has a degree in chemistry and a diploma in anatomy and physiology, and she's trained in integrative nutrition and functional medicine. Jules specializes in midlife health, and she has a particular passion for enhancing energy, longevity, and health span, enabling people to live better for longer. Jules founded Feel Glorious in 2011, and she works internationally with individuals and businesses. Thank you so much for joining me, Jules. It's nice to see you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure.
So I was doing a bit of research ahead of recording and found some really interesting statistics. And one of them that I wanted to discuss with you in particular that showed that as of 2022, the median age of divorce was between 43 and 46 years old. So that shows what I think a lot of us expected, that's a time in our lives where we tend to make this big decision. And I was interested in getting your view as to whether it is because of midlife, or is there a correlation, or is it just that it's because people have been married for a few years by the time they're at that age, and there's that natural slump in the marriage?
Well, being in your 40s for women, it's such a pivotal time in so many different aspects of our life. So a lot of women find often they've had years, decades sometimes, of balancing work, career, family, and all those commitments. And then because of that, often you find you put your own needs last. And we do it willingly. We absolutely do it willingly and joyfully often. But there's often been a time where we've got so used to prioritizing the needs of our career, our families, our children, that you get to your 40s, and particularly at a point where your children start to get a bit more independent, where there's this sudden sense of you're not as needed anymore. There's a slight less purpose, and women get a little bit of a wobble in their sense of identity often. Mm-hmm. There's another interesting thing that I've seen happen. I work with so many women over the years, and obviously amongst colleagues and friends and people I speak with. Over and over again, there's just that sense of a need to change their way of the substance of their career. So a lot of women find they suddenly want something with more purpose.
That was my story.
Exactly. And questioning not just the practicality of their day. I'm working with someone at the moment, and we were just speaking on Friday about her need for not prescribing to this, not even 9 to 5, this sort of 8 till 8 relentless work life that really was created for a male population. So there's a questioning of the practicalities and whether that suits them anymore. And there's a questioning of purpose and fulfillment. So for some women, that's a really exciting place to be because you feel kids are leaving, there's a freedom, there's an opening. But for a lot of women, it's really scary. And it's really challenging. And it can feel like a bit of a grief because what you can see is the loss. Excuse me, but you're not yet in the place where you can see clarity of what the future can be. So that can cause a lot of shifts in perspective of the way women feel about life. And then that obviously has a knock-on effect of the way they're showing up for people and in relationships. And naturally, your relationship with your partner, which can have become very focused on the needs of the family and the children, you start questioning that too. So it's such an important decade for women and an appreciation that that's a really common shift and path. It's important just to recognize that it's not just you. So many, huge proportion of women are going through these same changes and shifts. And it doesn't mean that you're, less in any way, less capable, less purposeful. It's just a really common shift that people find in their 40s.
I've definitely seen that. I think a lot of women around me, I'm in my mid 40s, have had that kind of shift. And I think there is definitely an element of the children growing up and losing that purpose, but also that fear, maybe it's not a fear, but that need to redefine yourself a little bit in that moment and what you stand for, because you're no longer as needed as a mother. And sometimes professionally, as you said, you're not that fulfilled. And so figuring out who you really are and what you really want, it can be a wonderful opportunity, but also quite scary.
Yeah. And for most people, you see in the media, it's all what you see out there is very much, the 40s can be so great and 50 is the new 30 and 50 is so empowering. And if that's not where you're personally feeling, it can make things even worse. But never believe, what you're seeing outside in social media and in magazines is very much the select fews, tiny 1% of their life that's showing up, on their best possible day, rather than the reality of the rest of us and the rest of their lives even, that's not even an adequate representation. So I think not women have a tendency to judge ourselves very harshly. And over the years, I've found that over and over again, especially, you compared to men who don't tend to have that same level of self-judgment, that if we fail to realize how amazing we've been over the years of continuing in a career, bringing up a family with no instruction manual, dealing with everything we have to deal with. The challenges that our kids have to face these days are immense. And that takes a huge toll. We are a lot of people I'm working with. There's the challenge of older parents. Women sitting in that sandwich generation, where there's also the challenges of looking after your older parents, who are very often distant geographically, and the challenges that is practically as well as emotionally. So it's a huge,
especially when you still have teenagers at home and you're trying to juggle both. It's yet another thing to worry about.
Exactly. So, and the challenges for kids now are just huge compared to when we were young. And so it's a lot for women, and we tend to judge ourselves for not coping when actually we are universally amazing in all the things we're having to cope with compared to what our own mothers even had to deal with. It's huge, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for it, and we really should.
Right. I agree. And then, there's another big change that happens in midlife, which we haven't touched upon yet. But, there's the physical changes, the psychological changes that come with that, with, perimenopause and menopause, and what that does, first of all, to our bodies, but also to that sense of suddenly we can no longer be mothers. And that's also a grieving process. Do you see any impact between that and of that on people's decisions in midlife and how they experience that time?
I do think there's a change in perspective that happens. There's a lot of physical changes. I think what I see the most happening for women in their 40s is, even though awareness of menopause has skyrocketed in the last 5 to 10 years, the awareness of the symptoms, the awareness of solutions, and the conversations that are happening around it and the information there's far more than there was even just 5 or 10 years ago. But I still find that the majority of women really don't, they still see it as something that happens to women in their 50s, and it's all about hot sweats and flushes and that kind of thing. What tends to happen, the most common part, is that it starts in your sort of early 40s with anxiety. The impact of the anxiety on women, when you add that into the mix of all the things we've just spoken about, which are already leaving you wobbled in your sense of self and your place in the world, and suddenly you've got added anxiety that seems it's come from a hormonal imbalance and an impact on your whole hormonal sort of orchestration in your body, which is very elegant, but the way we live, there's other elements of our current kind of lifestyle, particularly in management of stress, that impact hugely on those hormonal changes, which are all natural. But if you don't realize, we think again of menopause and perimenopause, about sort of, everyone talks about estrogen and taking estrogen patches. The hormone that diminishes first is actually progesterone.
Yeah.
It drops off really quickly, and it starts much, much earlier. So as early as sort of late 30s, early 40s. And progesterone is the hormone that calms us.
Yeah.
That gives us a sense of, it helps us manage stressful situations in a way that we can have calm focus. When that drops off, there's no buffer to the stresses of life.
Yeah.
But particularly for anyone that's got maybe some relationship challenges, where you might have a capacity to deal with that in a level way. If you add in the hormonal imbalance of low progesterone, it's just adding a huge bucket of fuel to a fire, and your ability to cope with that in a calm, rational way that's true to you becomes very compromised. So I think understanding that the changes happen earlier, and again, not to judge any anxiety and impact on sleep. Those are the things that often happen first, and the mood changes, and you can start to find you get erratic moods that you can't explain. And again, because women judge ourselves, we see that as a problem that we are less than. We go from feeling like we're capable, we're accomplished, we've been successful in our work, to feeling like we can't cope.
Yeah.
And for questioning who this erratic, grumpy, irascible, irritated, moody monster is. And then when it flings out and affects other people, it then has a knock-on effect, and then we won't worry how people are perceiving us. So again, that can have such a huge impact on, again, how we show up in our relationships and our ability to be true to what we really want. We become a bit more reactive, and it becomes a bit more like that sort of reptile primitive brain action, which is to do with safety, security, rather than using our more developed, rational, cognitive abilities to be able to come from a more considered perspective. And I think when that starts to happen, if you don't realize that there's changes going on, and be able to take a step back, maybe get some support in mediating those conversations, it can start to become very volatile. And that's, again, it's never a surprise to me when you hear the divorce statistics for that kind of decade. Yeah, because that's in the mix, and it's no fault of either party. It's just when you have some awareness of it and you can work in that context, it can lead to a very different outcome, and far less emotionally charged, because there's so much emotional depletion happens through difficult relationship challenges, and that's a downward spiral, because the more emotionally depleted you get, the less able you are to be able to bring, some calm, considered, wider perspective on what the relationship brings you.
Mm-hmm. And I often hear from clients as well that they don't feel supported by their husbands during that period of time. And, you touched upon the awareness around menopause, and, hopefully that's also being shared with with men, because it's important for them to have that awareness as well of what their wives are experiencing. And oftentimes that sense of being kind of unsupported during that transition can be really hard. And actually, I was looking at the stats, and another statistic I found really interesting. It's based on research from the Family Law Menopause Project, and the Newson Health Menopause Society. And they found that 73% of women attribute their divorce to menopause or perimenopause. And then about 67% of women said that menopause led to domestic disputes and arguments. Have you witnessed that in your own practice and your experience working with women?
I wouldn't say that particularly it's a direct result of.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've discussed, the challenges of being in in your physical body when these changes are happening, it's definitely a contributory factor. Yeah. Because of all the things that I mentioned, of your lack of ability to bring a bit more considered reasoning to it, but also it does lead to, if you feel like your partner doesn't understand, mm-hmm. that's definitely, obviously, lack of understanding, empathy, and communication between partners is a huge contributing factor.
Yeah, at any stage in life, actually.
Exactly. And if you can't communicate that effectively to your partner, it becomes really, really hard. And I mean, I have noticed, particularly even just in the last 12 months, the number of times I do a lot of work in this particular space. I talk a lot to audiences about the menopausal transition, but I'm finding that audiences are now bringing in men, and companies even are wanting to bring men into this conversation. And actually, when I give these, whether it's online, I've done lots of in-person events, the number of times that men have come up to me afterwards and talked about how important this is for their wives. Brilliant. And there's much, I can see a growing trend towards men taking some responsibility for wanting to support, understanding that their support mm-hmm. makes so much difference. And ultimately, the knock-on effect is it benefits them.
Of course.
Because the more they can support. And even I was invited into a business last week where it's the owner is a man, but his entire team are women.
Okay.
And brought me in very much to support the women, because he recognizes that actually there's areas in which they're struggling, but acknowledges this has nothing to do with their capability and their accomplishments and their ability to do, they're amazing women, but he wants to support them in whatever way he can to do the best job they possibly can do. And if supporting
that's great.
with their health can do that. So, that's so encouraging to see. And it's a process and it will take more time. But to see that is really helpful, because actually one thing I find a lot of women experience, and a big challenge around awareness, is actually the inconsistency of the medical profession and their attitude and approach.
Okay.
And I've had such a spectrum from people whose local GPs are so aware, so informed, understand the pros, the cons, the options, and very supportive, mm-hmm. to the ones who will dismiss these women with, in my day, you just had to get on with it. Oh, you're being hysterical. Don't take HRT, it will give you a stroke.
Oh, wow.
So the spectrum and the inconsistency of the experience women have when they go to seek help, mm-hmm. that's very difficult to deal with, because you really need to get support. Absolutely. And you need to feel like, whether it's your husband's, whether it's your workplace, whether it's your medical provider, your primary care provider, you want to feel like you're understood and supported and informed and given some options. Yeah. And that's, whether in the workplace or whether in the sort of GP services, that's sporadic and patchy. And Absolutely. Again, it's improving, but for a lot of women, and I was recently giving a talk, and it was in the north of England, and the level of negative experiences they'd had was huge.
Yeah.
And that is very difficult to hear, particularly
sure.
coming from the perspective of these are practitioners, different as workplace providers. That's not in their sort of their primary realm of knowledge and experience, but from a medical profession, that's a difficult one. But it's great that there's a lot more independent, there's the ability to independently look around for support now.
And that's what you do, of course. So how do you help women both on the physical and the mental side of this transition?
Well, my view is every woman is coming from that. We're all individual, and everyone has different bodies. We've got different genetics. We've got different body makeup. We've got different metabolisms. Everything about us is different. Our lifestyles and the things that challenge us are very unique. Yeah. So, and even the ability or desire to use HRT is varied in women. Yeah. And whilst there's a lot more availability and awareness of the pros of taking HRT, again, I see that as one piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. So I want to look at, my view is very much not just what's the symptom that needs to be alleviated in this client. It's actually who's the client and what are all the contributory factors causing the symptom, because the medical profession at best is suppressing symptoms. Mm-hmm. And they're doing that from a medical point of view by blocking pathways in the body that relieve the symptom, relieve the pain, relieve the discomfort. But it's not a long-term solution because it's not getting at the root cause of it. Yeah. And that's imbalances and different and slightly adjusted dynamics in the body that have just slightly gone out of whack. So from my perspective, I'm looking at everything that could be contributing to that, mm-hmm. whether it's your stress levels, whether it's that you're going through an emotionally turbulent charged time, like a divorce, whether you're challenged at work, how well you're sleeping, what's your metabolism like, mm-hmm. what's your glucose regulation like, because that has a huge impact, because insulin is a hormone. Yeah. And hormones all work together in the body and they impact each other. So if your insulin sensitivity is off, it's going to massively affect your hormonal levels and your hormonal kind of peaks and troughs. So, and looking at and how well you sleep and all the sort of contributory factors are really important. So it's a very kind of holistic view. And I recently, someone said, holistic means basically is a whole list of things that you need to look at and actually uncover, because when you uncover those and you take small steps that are achievable, it's not about giving someone this long list of do's and don'ts, because that just doesn't work. Yeah. Certainly not in the long term. It's finding ways that you can just slowly make small changes that can be sustained in your life. And again, this is very individual for everybody. It's understand your own body, mm-hmm. what your life and the inputs you're giving to your body, whether that's food, whether that's lifestyle, whether that's the amount of stress and how you manage it, how well you're sleeping. It's like, what are those impacts and how can you change and adjust over time, so that gradually you can just start to get your body back into balance, because your body is very elegantly designed, mm-hmm. and it's not broken. When you're having all these symptoms and discomforts, your body's not broken. Your body is just adjusting itself in the best way it possibly can, mm-hmm. with all the circumstances and inputs you're giving it. And sometimes just changing a few of those can make such a difference. And then in the long term, I want women to be able to, I'm not the kind of sort of nutritional practitioner who is taking out entire food groups, banning alcohol, alcohol's poison, coffee's poison, don't ever eat carbs, don't have high fat, just no red meat. That's not the way our human bodies are designed. Mm-hmm. And also, our human bodies are designed for community and for joy and pleasure. Yeah. And if we're following these miserable, rigid diets where we're measuring all day long and we're managing our life just to get our health better. That's no way to be. It's not true health.
And it's not sustainable, is it? I mean, you can't keep it up there. Oh.
So it's finding ways that can get us to a point where we can, again, just really enjoy life to the absolute full, show up at our best, be able to deal with, stressful situations will happen. Life throws curveballs at everybody.
Yeah.
And the more we are in a position where we understand our own body and we know what serves us and what doesn't, and that can change over time. And when you're there, it's very empowering to feel that you are holding the reins of your own health and your own life. And I think a lot of the challenges, as we've spoken about, whether that's you're feeling sort of out of control with how your relationship's going, or you're feeling uncertain about what your future is, when you feel like you've got agency over your own body and mind, you feel far more empowered. And again, you can deal with the uncertainty of, well, there's a new stage of life coming.
Yeah.
If this relationship challenge does end in divorce, it's not the end of everything.
Yeah.
It enables you to have a more balanced perspective and just be able to meet that challenge of, yes, there'll be some uncertainty. Yes, there'll be some grieving for the life I thought I was going to have, but I'm better able to deal with that and look to the future with a sense of empowerment.
Yeah, I love that. So that's actually quite a good segue into my last question, because I like to finish my podcast by asking my guests to share 3 tips. So in this scenario, what would be your 3 tips to a woman going through midlife and who's seeing the impact it's having on her marriage? It's having negative impacts. What would be your 3 tips to help her through that?
Well, basically for me, taking responsibility of the sort of being more intentional about the 3 S's, which are stress, sugar, and sleep. Those 3 things, if you can start to be aware and be really honest about what's going on for you, and be really intentional that actually if you just put a little bit of commitment to those 3 elements, menopause and the 40s and transitions in life is all natural. Yeah. We all go through it. But being able to deal with those 3 S's, but surround yourself with other people, get the information you need, find a tribe of people that you need, find yourself a supportive practitioner, find yourself a supportive group of women. They exist all over the place now, whether it's a sort of supportive group who are going through a divorce, or whether it's a supportive group who are transitioning through menopause. Finding groups of women together are incredibly empowering and lift each other up. And doing that, but again, focusing on those 3 S's, your stress levels, because the impact on your hormone balance is huge and they've got a knock-on effect on each other. Just really prioritize sleep. Yeah. And look at sugar, because we do tend to, in stressful, traumatic, emotionally turbulent times, because this is biochemistry. It's not something we should be judging ourselves for. Yeah. So if we're stressed and we're not sleeping very well and we're going through emotional turbulence, our biochemistry, it's craving more, we'll crave glucose, we'll crave some alcohol. But understanding that and being intentional about, actually, do I really need that? Could I swap that for something else? And looking after yourselves, not in a hugely restrictive way, but just really prioritizing your attention on those 3 things. Yeah. You'll meet each day in a different way than if there's a temptation to let yourself kind of slip and just go for the slight self-medication, which is natural. Yeah, of course. Your body, again, that can happen never judge yourself if you have, if you slip up or you do that from time to time. But again, try and try and just, again, some intention and commitment towards those 3 S's is a really good thing.
I love that. So was that tip number 3, or was that kind of the 3 wrapped into that? Those 3 S's are the 3 tips.
Well, they could be my 3, but to be honest, again, I think get informed. If it's going to be 3, you could get yourself really informed about all the options and all the issues. Find a supportive group. Find a supportive group and a supportive practitioner. Whether it's someone like yourself supporting someone through the transition itself, or it's someone more on the sort of health, physicality side, whether it's a supportive GP. And a group of women, being able to talk about your experiences, both physical and mental and emotional, is a really important part, particularly for women. It's a really important component of healing. We tend to look at the metrics. So we tend to look at, sort of weighing things, what you measure, you can manage, all of those things. All of that's really important. But understanding the emotional and the community and the sharing for women especially is so powerful in accelerating all the other bits that you're doing and accelerating healing, both emotionally and physically.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, like anything that's, any difficult transition in life, being surrounded by people who got your back and who understand what you're going through, it makes a massive difference.
It really does. It really does. It's a
Thank
huge.
You so much.
Look at any of the blue zones where people live longer, happier lives around the world, and community is central to it. Yeah. So I always think, you look to what's worked over centuries and centuries, follow that, because you can't argue with centuries of benefit.
Oh, that's true. Absolutely right. Well, it was so helpful to have all your tips and all that information. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's always such a pleasure to chat with you.
Have a great day, Jules.
You too. Bye.
Bye.